feel sick. Breakfast, food. Em ơi, cái ăn không? Ok. I was also reading an article that was written quite a while ago now. I mean, 2002, time's going by fast, by Ariel, Heryanto. And it was on like can Southeast Asian, can Southeast Asians produce Southeast Asian studies, or I don't know, there's something about that. And it's this kind of broad-ranging article. It's absolutely fantastic, I think, in that he doesn't really take any side or doesn't come out sort of promoting one thing. He sees the complexity in everything that's happening out there. And when you read that article, you see complexity in everything that's happening out there. But one thing that kind of struck me in there is, and it's something I've been thinking about, is he highlights this one person who wrote a critique of Southeast Asian scholarship in actually, I think 89 or 91 or something like that. Gosh, the name's, I'm sick. I can't, it was like, it's not Strange, it's like Stange or something. I don't know, I'll link it below. But the idea was that while Southeast Asian studies has emerged as a critique of, say, the Orientalism of the colonial era, in practice, this person argued, that hasn't necessarily been the case. And this is something, so I have to go and read that article to see exactly what this guy says. But you know, the commentary by Heryanto really stimulated me, because this is something that I've been thinking about as well, is if you read histories of Southeast Asian studies, you know that it says, okay, this began after World War II, and that prior to that you have colonial era scholars who produce knowledge that's influenced by their colonial mindset. They see Southeast Asia as a place that's totally influenced by outside. And then Southeast Asian studies is implicitly meant to, you know, you're supposed to understand that they corrected this. But there's no critique of Southeast Asian studies, right? So you read these, when you read an account of the history of Southeast Asian studies, we know that to some extent the colonial era people, they're the bad guys, but now it's okay because we're moving forward and we're fixing that, okay? But okay, decades have passed since the 60s. What do we got here? That's like 40, 50, 60 years. And is it the case that there were no politics that influenced the emergence of Southeast Asian studies? You know, there was nothing in the ethos of the time, like in the times of, say, colonial era, that we can now have the distance of, that we can look back and say, oh, there's some things there that need to be corrected as well. And I think this is what Heryanto, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just think that one very powerful ethos, which is, you know, decolonization, that has been so powerful that probably somehow overwhelmed all other kinds of politics that may have shaped orientations towards Southeast Asian studies, or I don't know.
I mean, decolonization is out there.
But until this very moment.
But I think the bigger politics were what I would refer to as maybe something like baby boomer politics or post-World War II generation politics.
Okay.
Because Southeast Asian studies emerged 60s and 70s. This is when the post-war generation, the baby boomer generation is coming of age. It's when all of their politics were being formed, their opposition to the Vietnam War. And those politics blended with decolonization to create a kind of sympathetic sort of enterprise where people were trying to demonstrate that those colonial, writers were wrong. We are right. Let us tell you what reality
What
is.
the truth is, right? Okay.
So in the 1990s, cultural studies emerged and made this critique of area studies that it was complicit with colonialism, that it's following government agendas. And people in area studies, resisted that. And in many ways, they're right. I mean, I don't think, even though, area studies was set up with government support for like area study centers, it hasn't followed any clear government agenda, at least in the US. I mean, scholars have gone on to study whatever the heck they want to without any concern for government policy or anything like that. But it has been driven by a certain generational politics, I think. And
or the politics of the time.
right. And so, so of course, people like this would reject the idea that they're Orientalizing or that they're complicit with government agendas or something like that. But I think we could argue that their politics did create did go towards providing an essentialized version.
Yes.
It's a very sympathetic view of Southeast Asia, but it's an essentialized view of Southeast Asia. And so this, I was reminded of this recently. I think the other day I was reading this paper, this long story, but from a student. And the student was talking about some recent ASEAN, was it women's meeting or something like that? I can't remember. See, I'm still sick. But basically, it was this meeting of women from ASEAN who were making the statement that, women need to be given equality. They need to be taken seriously. They need to be discriminated against. And I thought to myself, they need to not be discriminated against.
Okay.
Yeah. And it made me think of how much has been written about the special status of women in Southeast Asia, the more autonomy, all of these things. Well, if that's the case, then what the heck is going on, that people in the region don't seem to know this,
I think special, but not special enough, maybe.
Or, so this is where I think we could, if there's colonial era scholarship, and that's Orientalist to some degree, then I think we can identify something as I would call sympathetic essentialist scholarship that's tied to the politics of the post-war generation, decolonization, that in its own way is also as disconnected from some kinds of reality as colonial scholarship was. I don't see, it's meant to be a corrective, but it goes far too far in correcting and creates its own essentialized biases.
Maybe it has gone so far that it kind of either fails to recognize or just ignores on purpose, a lot of complex realities. Yeah.
Which makes me wonder, what I would call an ASEAN Studies program at VNU will do. Does it go beyond these sympathetic, essentialized ideas, or does it sort of see this as authoritative because it's coming from, the core scholars who established the field of Southeast Asian studies, and it's in English, and will teach that as what is Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I think we don't have the answer for that yet, but let's see. Yeah. I recall a lot of conversations with colleagues in different Vietnamese universities who were involved in developing teaching materials to incorporate so-called knowledge about ASEAN countries to prepare Vietnamese students.